Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7 Now today. Got some more dev notes for you guys. This time around, we're going to be talking about the RTA Pursuit Season Infographic. Now, at the end of every RTA season, the dev team comes together and compiles a whole spreadsheet of information, and this time around, we have data on three major topics. The first one being pre-bans, right? The most common pre-bans, the percentages of each hero broken down in terms of leagues. All of these leagues are going to focus around Champion, Emperor, and Legend. Anything lower than Champion isn't really considered because the players down there aren't as competitive as the ones up at the tops, right? So we also have a look at the first pick rates, right? What are people first picking? And by first pick, they mean whoever has the first draft, whoever goes first in draft, what unit are they picking for their first slot, right? We're not looking at turn 2 players, we're not looking at someone who's going second and then drafting as their first pick. We're looking at the first person and what they're picking. And then the last thing is we're going to look at the overall pick rate, right? This could be units that are picked in any of the 5 slots during either player's draft, just seeing who the most popular units are overall, okay? And we'll talk about them and we'll break it down as we go along. But first, let's go ahead and take a look at the top 20 pre-bans in all stages. We're going to focus most of our times in the all stages because this compiles all of the data together, right? And it's a bit better to see the overall trends and patterns. We will briefly talk about like the little, you know, maybe consistencies that we see between Champion, Emperor, and Legend, but, you know, I don't want to spend too much time diving into all of those little nitty-gritty specifics because that'll take way too much time, and your time is way more valuable than analyzing these topics about a video game, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this here with the pre-bans overall in Champion, Emperor, and Legend. Number 1, surprise, surprise to nobody at all, it is going to be Harsetti. Okay, so Harsetti has almost a 70% pre-ban rate overall, and that is to be expected. As you guys have seen from me playing so much RTA over the season, Harsetti is just absolutely oppressive. Her passive is something that, even though she might not be the most insanely busted unit ever, I would say, right? Harsetti is just really unfun for a lot of players to play against. If you're a faster player, you don't enjoy it. You can't go first, right? Unless you're picking Zio. And Harsetti, even for slower players, a lot of people are building Harsetti on injury. They're just chipping away at your bruisers, right? You can open with Harsetti. She can defense break your team. She makes you unable to be buffed, unable to counterattack. So for even slower play styles, Harsetti is just a really annoying unit, and no one really wants to deal with that. People also, even if you are a slower player, you don't want to deal with the speed RNG of base speed Harsettis. A lot of people are picking Harsetti with little to no speed, and those Harsettis are absolutely disgusting, right? Because what happens is the speed RNG still applies. If you don't know what speed RNG is, at the start of the battle, your characters can get up from a 0 to 5% like variability in their speed, right? In terms of an increase. So when Harsetti sets everyone to base speed, it basically becomes a speed RNG race, right? If your opponent gets lucky with speed RNG, let's say they get a plus 4% on one of their units, they're going to go first before your unit, even if your unit is typically built with more speed or has more base speed than theirs. So Harsetti makes a lot of matches RNG, and a lot of people don't like that. As you know, RNG is notorious in RTA for frustrating players, and minimizing the RNG that you face for more consistent matches is essentially the goal. So Harsetti, terrible plague on the state of the game right now. I personally don't like her, and I kind of wish she was never implemented into the game, but she's here, and, well, players making it known that they don't like her. Next up is New Moon Luna, also a really high pre-ban rate. Now, this is to be expected. New Moon Luna is so strong because there's essentially no way to counter a New Moon Luna opener, right? You can counter things like, let's say, Sea Phantom Politis with an Earth Selene. You prevent the Sea Phantom Politis from using her S3, right? You can use Fire Politis, for example, as well against Sea Phantom Politis. You can proc your passives and such off of her non-attack skill. But New Moon Luna, you can't do anything about. She'll seal all of your units' passives with her non-attack skill, so you can't even use something like Selene into this. While you can use cleansers, New Moon Luna doesn't really care because you can just have other openers, and think about this as a holistic thing, right? Don't just look at these statistics as, oh, New Moon Luna is absolutely broken. It's not just New Moon Luna herself, but it's the team that she can surround herself with. Because she is such a good opener, and she has really little counters, you can't even use Zeo to push her back, because she has skill effect nullifier and usually built with immunity set, right? So when you have things like Zeo that can't counter her, it becomes a speed race. But even if you have a speed race, let's say you go Sea Phantom Politis or something, you S3, you can't push back the New Moon Luna. You can't do anything to New Moon Luna at the start of the match. She essentially goes and will have a free turn, unless you can kill her by speed contesting her, right? It's really rare that you'll see someone like go tank down, and then if you do that, you're gonna have to bring a bunch of cleansers. Typically in that case, you're better off just banning New Moon Luna and fighting the other 4 units, because she does so much on her own. Right. Speaking of tank down, though, Empyrean Ilanov also an overall pretty high pre-ban rate. We see here 52.4%. She is a very, very strong defensive unit. Most of these units up here you're actually going to see are very offensive units. She's one of the rare defensive unit. The other one being Dragon Bride Senya, who's nowhere close in terms of the pre-ban rates here we see. So yeah, Empyrean Ilanov basically allows you to go toe-to-toe with units that would normally absolutely one-shot your entire team, right? Think about things like Midnight Galililius, right? Those units like Straze, Emma Laika, all those units that go first and just nuke your team into oblivion. Empyrean Ilanov doesn't let that happen because of the defense penetration resistance that she gives everyone on your team. She's also just really strong because of her Indomitable buff, her passive that allows her to push herself up whenever anyone on your team gets hit, so she can cut really easily, turn cycle. She also has injury built into her kit. She's just a very solid option all around, right? Really good against certain cleave units as well, like ML Ludwig. So Empyrean Ilanov, pretty versatile. We see the other units here, like Sea Phantom Politis, Afternoon Soak Flan, they're starting to catch steam, right? This is an overall analysis. We'll take a look at the breakdowns by stages in just a second. Zeo is also really common pre-ban. A lot of people aren't really interested in fighting cleave and aggro right now. A lot of people are playing cleave and aggro as well, so it's a lot of speed racing, and Zeo takes the speed out of speed racing. He's guaranteed to go first, even against Harsetti, right? So that's why you see Harsetti and Zeo up here in the top 10. They're very, very strong units. DDR as well, hanging up at the top here with BBK following right behind. We also got Bellion pre-banned as well. The Bellion, Zeo, Harsetti pre-bans are very typical if you're trying to cleave and stuff. You don't want these units like gatekeeping you from going first and taking those first turns, right? Sea Phantom Politis also just very good overall, and her popularity is understandable because of things like, well, Afternoon Soak Flan rising in popularity. She relies on focus. Sea Phantom Politis shuts down focus and fighting spirit. A blanket effect on the team, right? We do see Knockwall dropping down pretty low. 8 Tywins still hovering in there. Bryceria, Amiki, Mor, Dilibet, Solitaria, Ron, Hellion Lua, and Abyssal Euphine. Kind of strange to see Abyssal Euphine up there, but yeah, overall, she is still a decent unit to have. But as we go down, these units become a little bit less impactful in my opinion. Briarwitch is up here, is a little bit more significant. You'll see her pop up from time to time because she got her EE where she gets a 10 extra speed. A lot of people have been building her as an opener, and well, an opener that Soulburn ignores res, prevents revives, and defense breaks your entire team. It's a pretty strong opener, right? So we're gonna go ahead and just take a quick look at the breakdown in terms of stages. So early in the RTA season, we see it was actually New Moon Luna that was pre-banned more than Harsetti. A lot of people were testing out the Harsetti, seeing how she would work, and once people started figuring that out, well, the meta started to shift. Harsetti went ahead and took the first place in terms of pre-bans here. We're also going to see some pretty notable things. Things like A Tywin and Knockwall start dropping off, right? You don't see them anymore in this infographic over here, but we still see DDR, BBK, and such hanging in there. I think people's fear of DDR was still present in the season because he was a pretty decent, like, later pick in the draft, right? He was still pretty decent until Schneel came out, and in which case DDR kind of dropped off. A lot of people didn't want to pick him anymore, and we see that here. So in the late stages of the season, DDR no longer a threat in people's eyes, at least no longer as big of a threat, because Schneel was there to punish those players that picked him. And we have Harsetti, New Moon Luna, Empyrean Ilanov, you know, the top 4 or 5 units still there, right? This reflects the overall like average that we saw earlier, but again, we're just looking at trends. We're not going to dive too deep into all these stage breakdowns because, again, this video would be way too long otherwise. Looking here, though, we see, just really briefly, a comparison of the Oath season, Contention season, and Pursuit season. So the current season that ended a few weeks ago, the Pursuit season, along with the previous season, the season before that. The overall breakdown here is actually pretty interesting because you see the pre-ban rates here, right? We'll just look at, let's say, the top 5. Harsetti, New Moon Luna, Empyrean Ilanov, C-Fan, Politis, and Afternoon Soak Flan. So you see the pre-ban rates here, right? About 70, 65, 50, 30, and 30. Going down to the Emperor League, we see it's over 70% in Emperor have Harsetti actually pre-banned. New Moon Luna about the same, Empyrean Ilana about the same. C-Fan and Politis and Afternoon Soak Flan actually have a little bit higher rates of pre-ban. Right, for the Emperor League. Sorry, I lost the chart there. But yeah, scrolling down here, we have the Legend tier, and yeah, you see Harsetti again, very consistent, high pre-ban rate, over 70% here. New Moon Luna following really close behind, almost 70% herself. C-Fan and Politis, Afternoon Soak Flan, and Empyrean Ilanov also have a big imprint on the Legend League as well. So you're gonna see that most of the people up here in Legend are pre-banning more of the aggressive units. I kind of put Harsetti into this aggressive category because you'll see that Harsetti is actually paired with a lot of high damage dealers that are really slow, that are easily abused with her. For example, BBK. BBK was one of the most commonly picked units, and we'll see when we see the overall picks later. She was a very commonly picked unit as a nuke to go along with things like Harsetti, and you can, you know, pair her up with other nukes like Arbiter Vildred and such, and they're really difficult to counter because of the immortality, right? So yeah, you see in the previous seasons, we actually have stuff like Genoa that was a really popular pre-ban, right? In the past season, this is up in Legend, with a 22% pre-ban rate. There is no Genoa here at all in this season. BBK has kind of taken over as the go-to nuke over Genoa because, well, Empyrean Ilanov preventing defense penetration makes Genoa's job of nuking a little bit harder. Plus, he's a single target nuke. BBK kills everything on the board. All right, next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the first pick chart for all stages. Again, this is averaging out the data from Champion, Emperor, and Legend. Keep in mind that the averages for this will heavily skew towards the Champion tier because there's so many more players in Champion compared to Emperor and Legend, right? So when we look at the first pick rates, wow, yeah, look at that. Afternoon Soak Flan. My complaints were not unjustified. She is picked a lot, and very early on as well. A lot of people at first pick will gravitate towards Afternoon Soak Flan because she's so versatile. She's good in a slower team, she's good in a fast aggressive team, and her built-in 100% evasion makes her really difficult to deal with. She also has a really good advantage against units that have anti-crit and stuff in them, and she also has a good advantage against counterattack units because her S1 can't be countered. So overall, very versatile unit, has CR pushing for the team, has defense breaks, can ignore res, she pushes herself up, she's a bridge unit, so there's no surprise that she's up here. Following close behind are New Moon Luna and Empyrean Ilanov. These two units are kind of polar opposites of each other, I'd say. If you're going New Moon Luna, you're typically going a bit more aggressive with your opening, and if you go Empyrean Ilanov, you're going much more defensive, you're tanking down. I used Empyrean Ilanov a lot in the past season, and that's mostly out of a necessity because things were so high damage nukes. There's so many high damage nukes out there that you had to kind of use her if you want to play a slower tank down style, right? You would get absolutely obliterated by things like Midnight God, Liliuses, and stuff otherwise. But we're also seeing things like Sea Phantom Politis and Dragon Bride Senya getting picked as well. Sea Phantom Politis, a pretty popular first pick overall. She is really good for, again, shutting down Afternoon Soak Flan. So if you're picking the Sea Phantom Politis, your opponent's typically not going to respond immediately with Afternoon Soak Flan. They might try to pick her later, but that gives you a really good opportunity to pick Flan afterwards for your own draft, right? Again, this is not the overall picks, right? We'll get to the overall picks later. These are just the first pick. Whoever the first player to draft, this is what they're picking first. Keep this in mind. Dragon Bride Senya is also a great way to set up for a pretty versatile team. Empyrean Ilanov and Dragon Bride Senya are both weird tanks in that cleave and aggro teams can actually utilize them pretty well. You have this really defensive, bulky wall as an anchor for your team. If you're not familiar with the word anchor, an anchor is a unit that's more bulkier than the rest of your team. If you have a really fast, aggressive team, typically they have really low HP, really low defense, and you build them with full damage and full attack, right? So when you have things like Dragon Bride Senya, for example, let's say you have a really weak squishy unit in your backline, and they go and they take their turn, they nuke the opponent counterattacks, and they hit that unit in the backline, drops them below half health. Dragon Bride Senya will then proc. Not only does she protect the unit in the backline, but she will now have an incredibly strong defense-penetrating AoE nuke to help finish off your opponent's team. So an anchor is a unit that has pretty decent damage capabilities of their own and can essentially act as a sweeper, a clean-up unit to follow up all your little typical DPSs. So Dragon Bride Senya and Empyrean Ilanov are both capable of doing that. Same with Blood Moon Haste, actually. If your opponent kills your squishy cleave units, you're going to go ahead and nuke one of their units and then revive your entire team. So Blood Moon Haste is also a pretty solid unit as well. You see him picked here, not a super high first pick rate, but again, keep in mind, you're competing with the likes of Afternoon Soak Flan, New Moon Luna, and Empyrean Ilanov, and these are not overall picks. Zeo as a first pick is also pretty common. A Tywin, same thing with the Dragon Bride Senya, Empyrean Ilanov. Those are three main light knights that you saw in the last season. The three main knights you saw at all, look at this, Last Rider crowd just sneaking up at the end of the season, right, to making it into that top 10 spot. But all the defensive knights here are light knights, and this is one of the reasons why Bystander Hua Young has such a big impact right now in the preseason, because she essentially shuts down a lot of these types of first pick playstyles, right? And myself included. I had to switch up my playstyle after her release as well. But you also see Zeo here as a first pick to stop people from contending, although Zeo is not first picked as commonly because New Moon Luna and Sea Phantom Politis are so strong right now. Sea Phantom Politis cannot be hit. She's usually on Guiding Light, so she has stealth. She starts with stealth, so she has that built-in Guiding Light, so she can't be hit. New Moon Luna, skill effect nullifier. If Zeo goes first and tries to hit her with an S3, if you have an immunity set on New Moon Luna, she's not going to be affected by it. You can't push her back, you can't do anything of that sort. You can't even debuff her for Zeo to use bridge units with, right? So that's why he's kind of fallen to the wayside in terms of a first pick. We'll still see he's still pretty impactful. Harsetti, also not a very common first pick, despite her being a very popular unit, because most people want to ban protect their Harsetti, right? Keep that in mind. Ban protection of Harsetti is key in a lot of instances. You see aggressive people also try to put Veronica into their teams. It's a really great way of countering the common BBK pick that you can see a lot of people tend to go for as well. She's a pretty decent damage dealer overall, right? With her double immortality, makes her incredibly difficult to deal with. You also see double immortality units in the form of Inheritor Amiki, so she's down here as well. Typically not a great first pick, but we'll talk about the statistics about them later. You also see things like Mort, Laya, Abyssal Euphine, Nockwell, and Politis here, but those are really rare instances of more niche types of team comps, right? So let's take a look at the stage breakdown here. Top 10 first picks in the early stage, and we see, look at that, pretty typical here. In the early stages before Schneel, DDR was still a threat, so myself included, I was using DDR as well, but after Schneel got released, you'll see that he drops off dramatically. BBK also a very common first pick. People just wanted to pick that double immortality and destroy everything. So you see here, DDR dropped from second most picked to the sixth most picked as a first pick unit in the mid stages of the game. BBK also dropping down a little bit as well, because, well, after New Soak Flan, giving all that momentum to the team, New Moon Luna still being able to seal the BBK, still gave people a pretty decent advantage overall, right? Now moving on into the late stages, where did DDR go? well, he's gone. There's no more DDR here, but BBK also not here anymore. She was very common in the earlier stages of the season, but as the season progressed, a lot of people just gravitated towards Afternoon Soak Flan as their main DPS unit, and then we saw a lot of other follow-ups in terms of support units, right? First picks are typically going to be supports, and you see Last Rider Crow actually beating out the A Tywin in terms of first picks as well, because Last Rider Crow, after his buff, is really, really nice. He also just is a natural counter to A Tywin, so if you first pick A Tywin, you're going to fight a Last Rider Crow, and that's not what a lot of people want to do. You're at a pretty big disadvantage for that because of the immunity buff that Last Rider Crow gives the team. So looking here at the season comparison, just really quickly, we see that in terms of first picks, we also see win rates associated with these first pick units, right? Now, 50% win rate is actually an average win rate. If you're below 50%, it means that the unit's not really performing as good, and if they're above 50%, they're performing pretty decently. So 50% is kind of cut-off threshold, right? So if there's a 50%, for example, let's say Harsetti here, Harsetti as a first pick has a 50% win rate. That means half the time you first pick Harsetti, you're probably going to win. Anything skewed a little bit more than 50% is going to be good. So for example, Afternoon Soak Flan winning more than she's losing as a first pick unit. Same thing with New Moon Luna, Empyrean Ilanov doing really good here. Sea Phantom Politis and Dragon Bride Senya also really nice. DDR dropping off. That first pick DDR, people just know how to counter him now. We have Celine, we have Schneel, we have all these things for him that as a first pick he doesn't work as well as he does like as a later pick. In terms of DPSs though, BBK actually has a higher win rate than Afternoon Soak Flan as a first pick unit, although she's way less common though, so that could be skewing the results here. Last Rider Crow, Blood Moon Haste, also pretty solid overall. Mort as a new introduction, also pretty good. Abyssal Euphine, certain teams revolving around her, she does pretty nice as well. And Designer Lilibet, also doing okay, but again, keep in mind, very low percentage of first picks here. Okay, that's for Champion. We see the same patterns going on for Emperor and above. So Afternoon Soak Flan, about 50% win rate. Empyrean Ilanov still hovering around 55%. ML Luna above a 50% here, 53. And we see Dragon Bride Senya. Sea Phantom Politis also doing pretty good. DDR struggling. Zio first pick definitely struggling. Again, no one's really first picking Zio because the New Moon Luna and Sea Phantom Politis are so strong against him that it's not as good to pick him. Compare that to, well, in previous seasons. He is also not doing really good in previous seasons, but he's doing much worse here. Look, under 45% win rate when it used to be 47, and the season before that, almost a 40, I mean, a little bit more than 47, 47.5 almost. So his usefulness as a first pick unit has been dropping as the seasons are going by, and that's why you don't really see too many people pick Zio or even Ron for that matter. You can see Ron here in the last season. He was pretty popular as a first pick, and look at that, 49% win rate. But again, with the release of Harsetti just kind of stifling those speed openers, the traditional type of cleaves, you see them fall off quite a bit. You see here as well, Ron, right, falling off, not even in this list here. Zio also struggling a little bit. He used to be really good in the Legend and above. A lot of people are playing aggressively here, right? Laya, Sea Lilius, Sea Phantom Politis, Zio meta, because Zio was really good into Sea Lilius. But as we see more units come out, like New Moon Luna, Sea Phantom Politis, that don't care about Zio, Zio's usefulness drops. Sea Phantom Politis and New Moon Luna stonks go up. Right, and we see that still continue here. New Moon Luna still keeping about the same win rate overall, and then Sea Phantom Politis, her win rate has dropped a little bit more than her impact in the past 2 seasons, but still a decent win rate in general. Above 50% again is pretty solid. Blood Moon Haste though, seeing pretty consistent performances in both metas from the last season into this season. Okay, so now let's go to the last category, the overall picks, right? What do we see for the top 20 most popular units in this last season? And boy, oh boy, there's no surprise. You see the units here. First one, Afternoon Soak Flan. So now this is not talking about just first pick data. This is talking about everything in general. So you can pick Afternoon Soak Flan as a ban protection, your 4th pick, your 2nd pick, your 5th pick. It doesn't matter, right? Overall, Afternoon Soak Flan found her way into 57.3% of drafts. That is a pretty significant number of drafts. Again, I talked about how useful she was, how versatile she was. she's just really good, and a lot of people want to pick her, myself included. BBK is up next. Look, a really high damage dealing nuke that doesn't defense penetrate, which is why Empyrean Ilinov had her, you know, kind of impact on the meta, right? Kind of taking away that Genoa. Look at that. Where's the Genoa? All the way down here, 26.8% compared to BBK right up here. Okay, not nearly double, but almost double the popularity of Genoa. He's kind of just fallen to the wayside a little bit. Still very good, still very strong unit, don't get me wrong, but fallen to the wayside a little. Dragon Bride Senya, 40.8%. Again, very good unit in terms of fighting things like cleaves and such, but also being used in cleaves and such, right? Dragon Bride Senya's popularity is also why Empyrean Ilinov gets pre-banned quite often, because people want to use these defense penetration units like Dragon Bride Senya to help protect their team, to nuke, to clean up. A Tywin's also a very popular pick. Again, all the Light Knights here, Dragon Bride Senya, A Tywin, Empyrean Ilinov, Last Rider Crow, very popular knight picks in general. But Ambitious Tywin's 40% pick rate is also why LRK's almost 30% pick rate is justified here, because he is, again, a natural counter into that A Tywin. DDR, his popularity was mostly due to the early season. However, do keep in mind that in the late season, he dropped off as a kind of an early first pick unit, and was very popular as a 4th and 5th pick unit where it's harder for your opponent to counter. They've probably already picked like 1 DPS and 3 supports and such, so their last pick could not really be something like a Schneel. Otherwise, you'd be left with 4 support units, no DPS, and then the DDR team. He just doesn't have to press buttons, and you'll win against Schneel in those cases. So DDR, popular last pick, so you see why his popularity is still there. Again, kind of skewed, because early season he had no counters out yet. No hard counters like Schneel, but he did have soft counters like Selene. We see Cfan and Politis here as well, pretty high up in terms of overall pick rate, and we see Designer Lilibet also following close behind. Cfan and Politis is a great way to ensure debuffs against your opponent when your opponent has Designer Lilibet, because Cfan and Politis shuts down Fighting Spirit gains, cuts it in half, and Designer Lilibet requires that to cleanse herself, push herself up. But Designer Lilibet is pretty good against a lot of debuff type teams, especially ones revolving around Harseti. Now you might be wondering, hey, well, Azza, why is Harseti the 12th most popular unit? Only 27.7% of matches had her. Well, that's because she's pre-banned in like 70% of the matches. So do keep that in mind. Harseti, when she's not pre-banned, is essentially almost always picked. She's a very, very oppressive unit, very strong kit, and she changes the flow of the game entirely, right? So do keep that in mind. This is factoring in after all the pre-bans, right, that have taken place. So we also see things like Amiki, double immortality unit along with the BBK, holding on here. She's a really good counter into things like Genoa and other fire units like Afternoon Soak Flan. So that's why she's up here. She's actually contributed to the fall of Genoa, although not enough to see the fall of Afternoon Soak Flan. You can deal with Inheritor Amiki in other ways with other team units. Afternoon Soak Flan is just so strong as a solo DPS that you can have 3 other support units take care of the Amiki, so it's not too big of a deal, although Amiki is still a decent unit into this, the Flan. Keep in mind though that Flan's S1 doesn't allow counterattacks, which is also one of the reasons why Flan doesn't care too much about Amiki, who really does rely on her counters to do work. Zio's overall pick is still pretty high, 26.7%, but again, dropped off, as I mentioned earlier, due to the openers resisting him, essentially, countering him with their passives and their mechanics. Blood Moon Haze still a pretty popular unit, along with the Laya. Laya's kind of seeing a drop in play, although you'll see Laya's pick rate is about the same as Knockwall's. Laya is usually picked with Knockwall in draft, or picked against Knockwall in draft. You won't see a whole ton of Layas just picked for no reason. Laya is pretty vulnerable to things like Cfan and Politis pushing her back with the speed down, preventing her from taking the turn, but she is good if you have a fast one into New Moon Luna, because she's a pretty good cleanser overall. Again, keep in mind that Laya and such are also weak to things like Selene, who has a very high pick rate. Right, a 27% pick rate. So all the non-attack skill units you see here, Cfan and Politis, DDR, we have Laya, for example, that's contributing to the popularity of Selene in the overall rankings. And then, last but not least, we do have down here, sneaking up for a cheeky little 18.3% pick rate is Solitaria. She actually saw a rise in popularity because, look at the number 1 slot. Afternoon Soak Flan. That's right. You can prevent Afternoon Soak Flan from gaining focus, which cuts down her evasion from 100% to 50%. Without any focus, Afternoon Soak Flan is kind of vulnerable, and if they're a squishier build, you can actually finish them off. So Solitaria saw a rise in popularity due to that, but again, she is countered by things like Designer Lilibet. She is countered by things such as other openers, right? For example, like Zeo and such can open and hit the Solitaria, push her back, all that good stuff. So yeah, she's not super high up in the rankings, but you can see she's definitely in response to the Afternoon Soak Flan there. That's how impactful Flan was to the meta. So, looking at the top 20 picks early stage, oh, look at that. BBK, DDR, A Tywin in the early stages. DDR, A Tywin was remnants of the previous meta from the previous season, but as we go along, we go from the early stages to the mid stages here. Imperial and Ilanov still keeping kind of the same place in both, but DDR's still kind of dropping a little. A Tywin's dropping a little. We see more Afternoon Soak Flan taking the top right there, 63.7% of matches. BBK, Dragon Bride Senya making their way up too, and we see the popularity of New Moon Luna, right? This is where she was getting pre-banned a lot along with Harsetti, so do keep that in mind. That's where they're a bit lower. And Mort was also pretty popular too, because of his buff. And then moving on to the late stage picks, we see the meta kind of settling a little bit. Afternoon Soak Flan still dominating in terms of picks. BBK, Dragon Bride Santa, C-Fan, and Politis. DDR dropping all the way to 12th place, right? And although A Tywin still keeping pace. 39% of matches, because once people stopped pairing him with DDR, people started pairing him with C-Fan and Politis and BBK. Because what's better than a rage buff Tywin ignoring res and defense breaking your team? Well, a BBK coming up afterwards and nuking everyone to oblivion. That's what. Also, you can just use Afternoon Soak Flan and do the same thing too. So yeah, overall, pretty interesting, right? Pretty devastating. Oh, look, I can maximize the image here. That's kind of cool. Anyway. Alright, we are back. So, yeah, overall, we see that Mort has also settled to the bottom here. Heli and Lua, newly buffed and introduced, right? Also making a bit of a splash in the late game stages. So, moving on here, we see the overall trends in terms of units and their overall win rates. So we see the win rates for Afternoon Soak Flan, BBK, two most popular damage dealers, are pretty consistent in the Champion League. We see the impact of Light Knights. A Tywin's kind of underperforming a little bit compared to the previous season where he had above a 50% win rate, right? Kind of underperforming a little bit this season, mostly because of the introduction of things like Last Rider Crow, who's kind of snuck up in here. He was not present in the previous season at all. 2 seasons ago, he had a 50% win rate, but now he's doing so much better, 51% here. Imperial Ilanov still really impactful with 55% overall win rate. DDR underperforming, and then we have things like C-Fan and Politis as well doing pretty decently along with Designer Lilibet and New Moon Luna. But yeah, otherwise, Amiki is kind of a toss-up. Again, she's good at countering certain units, but in a team-based game, as long as you're bringing a bulky Earth unit, Inheritor Amiki kind of falls apart to those units themselves. Celine actually not doing too hot here with a 47% win rate in the Champion League. It's because a lot of people can actually play around Celine. There's a lot of AoEs and such that you can use to kind of hit her out of stealth and take care of her early on, especially if you don't have a bulky build. Blood Moon Haste also very solid right here. Zeo though struggling a little bit, and I kind of feel that after I start playing a bit more aggressively, Zeo hasn't really been that hot of a pick. Again, New Moon Luna, C-Fan, and Politis kind of shuts him down. Laya struggling a little bit too compared to, well, previous season she was okay. 2 seasons ago she was really good, 50% overall win rate, dropped about 48%, now kind of maintained that 48% in this season. Again, not as good as she once was, kind of like DDR. Mort, though, seeing a really good win rate here, shutting down a lot of counter units, which is why you see a lot of counter things like Navy Captain Landy not show up anymore in this season's stats. Albedo as well, not very popular anymore, despite being very strong in the previous season. Mort has shut down a lot of things. Knockwall also not as good as she once was. Very low here in terms of win rate. I mean, I guess back here, she was also a pretty decently low win rate, right? 45.6%, not doing super hot there. But the reason, again, is because Laia is still here to kind of check her and keep her balanced. And then Solitary of the Snow sneaking up here. Because the Afternoon Soak Flans, she has a pretty decent win rate overall. A lot of people building her with like 250 plus effectiveness. So she's able to actually deal with a lot of high resist units and cleansers, which makes her really solid and versatile. Moving on, though, we see an Emperor, about the same statistics, 50% win rate for Afternoon Soak Flan, BBK doing pretty good, DDR underperforming, Ilanov doing very solid, Eitammen's okay, Dilibet's doing pretty good, right, New Moon Luna here twice for some reason, don't know why. But yeah, it's also doing really good. Blood Moon Haste, right? All that good stuff. The things that you love seeing when you queue. Solitaria, surprisingly, almost a 53% win rate up in Emperor, where people are a little bit more conscious of the other players that are around them. They're probably matching into those players more often. Keep in mind that the meta in Legend and Emperor is a little bit different than in Champion and below, because these players all know each other essentially by name, which is why we have to have anonymous matchmaking and stuff. But you're going to see that these players still kind of feel each other out with their profile pictures and such, so you see more targeted picks. Alright, we see here though, Harsetti and Legend actually not doing as hot here with a under 50% win rate. Heli and Lua doing pretty good near the end of the season. Celine kind of underperforming a little bit, same with the Laia, but Afternoon Soak Flan, Empyrean Ilanov, very consistent. DDR actually doing a little bit better up in Legend than he is in the other teams, but that's mostly because a lot of people have actually changed their DDRs to really slow, bulky builds and playing him alongside units like Harsetti. So you open up with a Harsetti, you have a really slow, tanky, oppressive DDR there to kind of follow up. Eitammen sort of underperforming just like in other leagues. Dragon Bride Senya also not doing too hot. Last Rider Crowd's doing okay though. So overall you see when it comes to Knights and tanking down, aside from Blood Moon Haste and Empyrean Ilanov, all the other units are kind of a toss-up in terms of their consistency, whereas you see a lot more consistency with faster-paced players, right? With their New Moon Luna, Sea Phantom Politis with insane win rates. Solitaria also 52% win rate here. Heli and Lua 52.5% win rate. Genoa also above a 50% win rate. So these aggressive, high-damage nukes are still outperforming these tankier teams, aside from Empyrean Ilanov, because she does shut down some of these units. But it's interesting to see these trends, right? The number of players we don't really care about overall in terms of match differences and such, so I will read to you Epic 7's overall thoughts. These are the devs' overall thoughts about the past season. This Pursuit season marked the second season featuring the ban protection system and saw the rise of a new meta centered around the new boss hero Harsetti. Despite the season being shortened by 1 week, the total number of matches held in the Champion League and above increased by approximately 8% compared to the previous season. We salute the efforts of all heirs who lit up the battlefield with more intense competition than ever. Yeah, of course, right? With Harsetti. Competition. For speed, that is, right? Looking back on the overall Pursuit season, the influence of heroes like Sea Phantom Politis and Noctwall remained strong but showed a decline compared to the previous season. Not really, actually. Sea Phantom Politis still very strong. Noctwall fell off hard, though. I don't know about remaining strong here. This shift was likely due to the introduction of Harsetti and Empyrean Ilanov at the start of the season. Harsetti played a central role in shaping the season's meta by countering high-speed units while enabling strategic use of a diverse range of heroes. I don't know about that. That's a pretty loaded statement, because New Moon Luna and Sea Phantom Politis are still very strong. She did stop traditional openers like Ron and such from being as effective though, so they are correct on that part. Diverse range of heroes, I don't know about that. A lot of it's the same heroes being used with Harsetti. Yeah, the community has actually dubbed it the villager team comps, actually. People who just re-gear their units to be base speed and super slow to use with Harsetti. It's why you have like 30 KHP DDRs, right? Like 40 KHP like tanks and such that are just being used alongside her. It's pretty obnoxious. So I think it's a lot of the same heroes that are being used. You might see some things thrown in like RB, BBK and such, but they're already pretty popular to begin with. It's just that they're being used in slightly different ways. So I guess a diverse range of strategies are getting introduced that weren't there before, but not necessarily heroes, I would say. Empyrean Ilanov also demonstrated remarkable strength in various situations, with her pre-ban and first pick rates rising as the season progressed. Yeah, once people figured out how dumb she was. Additionally, immortal heroes like Bloodblade Corinne and Inheritor Amiki were highly favored, probably because they don't die, while older heroes such as Mort, Designer Lilibet, and Last Rider Crown made a comeback, leading heirs to victory. That was a really good balance patch that they implemented, so it was really good. Finally, the stellar performance of Afternoon Soak Flan, the most popular pick among heirs, perfectly encapsulated the excitement of the season. Yes, the excitement of being shot down in one hit from a defense broken unit getting dual attacked with the Fire Flan. Harsetti opening with a defense break with Fire Flan following up is the reason why people started building immunity Dilibets and such, so you don't just outright die. So you actually have a chance to kind of cleanse the debuffs. So I don't know about the excitement of the Afternoon Soak Flan. I'm sure some people were excited in other ways, but you know, in terms of RTA, I don't know if exciting is the way to describe it. In summary, while the impact of new heroes stood out this season, existing heroes also showed versatile utility, especially around Harsetti, contributing to evolving meta through balance patches and other adjustments. They did do pretty good with their balance patches. Despite the community outcry, you know, they did introduce quite a few units that we're seeing a rise in prominence in the meta, right? Last Rider Crown, Dilibet, Mort, all those things definitely helped. However, we recognize concerns regarding the high metrics of certain heroes, Harsetti and Numa Luna, and are actively working to address this issue. I'm sure. With new mechanics of pre-bans and you know, frenzy, right? With heirs' feedback in mind, I'm sure, our goal is to minimize unbalanced combat experiences and ensure that the strategic choices made by heirs remain meaningful in various combat situations, like giving us more pre-bans to deal with teams that we don't want. Furthermore, we will carefully monitor the pace of changes to avoid making adjustments too rapidly during this process. And this is one thing that I actually do like that they said, because a lot of players want more frequent balance patches, more frequent changes, and I'm kind of against that just because it takes a few weeks for metas to settle. As you saw by, you know, the early season, mid-season, late season breakdowns, we're seeing gradual shifts in the meta, and that's much more healthy than seeing like the top 20 completely getting replaced by a new top 20, right? Or even the top 10 units getting replaced, or like half of them getting replaced all at once with a balance adjustment. You don't really want to see that. It makes things volatile, it makes things unpredictable, and that makes gameplay even more or even less fun than it is now, right? It becomes more infuriating to be able to just jump in and be like, whoa, what is going on? Why am I getting absolutely destroyed by this completely out of nowhere strategy that I've never seen coming, right? And we saw a lot of that this season with people doing Harsetti experimental teams, especially those dubbed like villager team comps, right? Fighting a 45k HP Alencia was definitely not on my bingo card for RTA this season, I can tell you that. So yeah, there's a lot of strategies there. They do need to be careful in how they implement it, but honestly, balance adjustments aside, they can literally just implement some sort of a frenzy change and test it out during the preseason. Like we're currently in right now that's set to end in a couple days. They can go for something like that, and it would help us out a lot. I'm just a little disappointed that they didn't. Right, next, we like to discuss the ban protection system. As the second season utilizing this system closely came to an end, we are observing and analyzing the changes it has brought to gameplay. However, we intend to proceed cautiously when considering whether to remove or significantly modify the current system. The reasons for this approach are as follows. First, the ban protection system makes it easier to build team compositions around specific core heroes, Harsetti, leading to more highly refined team comps, villagers. This benefits new heirs participating particularly in World Arena for the first time, as it helps them adapt to the game more quickly. I'd like to push back on that a little bit because good video game design, in terms of PvP content, should be balanced from the top down. You should never be balancing the game for the lower echelon of players in like bronze, silver, gold, and even up to like, let's say, master, right? Challengers where things start to get a little bit more intense, you're starting to compete for the place in champion. It's kind of a bridge rank, right? But anything below that, I don't think they should be catering World Arena to those players in those ranks, and nothing against players that are in those ranks, but good game design should be balanced from competitive play from top down, right? All the big MOBAs, first-person shooters and stuff like that, they balance the guns and weapons, right, for the top players, right? They balance the champions and such for the top players, and then that effect will trickle down, right? The people near the bottom will follow suit as the people up top are trying to figure out and determine a meta. You see a lot of discussion around these meta posts, right? You see a lot of people watching, well, my RTA content, you're probably watching other, like, legend players and such, like Light and stuff that are out there, you know, putting out their RTA content as well, teaching you guys how to play, and what units and team comps work well together. That's a top-down balance system, right? You want to implement something where the people at the top are playing comfortably without imbalance, so that trickles down. If you're balancing for the bottom, then the people at the top, it's going to be absolute chaos, and you're going to lose players, actually, which Epic 7 has been doing. You're losing a lot of, like, the legends, the emperors, a lot of people actually selling their accounts. A lot of former legend and emperor players sold their accounts, and now they're being piloted by completely different people, right? We already saw, you know, prominent account sharing in previous world championships and such, because people just don't want to play that much PvP by themselves, which is understandable, but also kind of breaks terms of service. Anyway, all that aside, what I'm meaning to say with this is that they need to balance them top down. They shouldn't be balancing based on the bottom echelon of players. It's poor game design. It does not help the overall system. More ban protections for the upper players should help. Maybe, I don't know how they're going to rework the ban protection system, but they should just be advertising Draft Arena more to help players adapt to the ladder, right? If they really want that. But they haven't really been pushing for Draft Arena. They just kind of left it off to the wayside. I'm glad they took away the time restrictions for it, though. That was kind of nice. Anyway, additionally, under the current ban pick system, bans occur after all picks are finalized, which makes it more challenging for counter heroes to function effectively during the ban pick process. They're talking about, like, if your opponent picks a bunch of openers, debuffers, and you're trying to pick a cleanser, that you have to kind of pick 2 cleansers. You can't pick 1 cleanser. Otherwise, you're screwed. They'll just ban your single cleanser, and then you're controlled for the rest of the game. But likewise, it goes the other way too. If your opponent pre-bans Zeo and first picks and ban protects Harsetti, you have very, very limited options of what you can do into that Harsetti, right? You can pick Designer Lilibet, ban protect her, but then out comes Elvira, Emma Politis, boom, your Dilibet is useless now. So there's a lot more nuance to this that I don't think that they're kind of accounting for here. The ban protection is nice. It is nice. I kind of like it sometimes because I do get to showcase units by guaranteeing that they'll make it through draft. It makes making content a little bit easier, but you should not be banning. You should not be balancing that around content making, right? You shouldn't be balancing it around, well, we want to push specific core heroes through. That's the whole purpose of the draft phase, is that, hey, if my opponent's going for a very linear strategy, I should be able to punish them for it. And what we're seeing is that it's actually kind of limiting the types of teams that we're seeing. We're seeing teams be so streamlined to the point where, you know, matches are kind of determined in draft now more than ever. Maybe that's the way they want things to go. I don't know how I feel about it though. I'd be okay if they remove ban protection, but I'm also okay with them keeping it. I just feel like we need more pre-bans or something to help us deal with the plethora of potential teams that are out there, because it's impossible for you to have counters for every team. Alright, team compositions heavily relying on specific heroes may also face higher than expected risks. The ban protection system helps address those challenges. Yeah, so now you can ban protect ML Ludwig, ensure he gets through, pre-ban Bellion, pre-ban Harsetti, open with Zeo, and a ton of other mages, and guarantee cleaves. Easy. Therefore, we will retain the ban protection system for the next season. However, we'll continue to gather feedback through various channels and closely monitor its in-game impact. We will strive to ensure that heirs have an even more enjoyable experience with Epic 7. Sorry to say, my honest opinions on this, and some of you guys have been watching the videos, the RTA videos will know this, but I know that a lot of people say, like, oh, every RTA season, there's people going like, this is the worst season ever. This is the first time I've genuinely felt that that RTA was not fun. Like, there was the RNG metas, like Rem and Violet metas. There was the ML Landy and Abyssal Yuffie metas. I was okay with all of those, just because you could still use fun units. You can still have some, like, really weird random teams and techs. Like, people use Bihu to nuke Navy Captain Landy. Like, where does that come from, right? But now we're getting to the point where, you know, it used to be during preseason, I can pick, like, Earth Rin and Fire Cecilias and stuff, and we would just have a good time. We would just chill. Now I can hardly even pick any unit that's not necessarily full-on meta, because we have such a streamlined system where, you know, essentially they can ban protect a unit that's really oppressive and you can't do anything about it, right? Let's say you don't pick New Moon Luna. You're like, oh, let's just have some fun. They ban protect a New Moon Luna against your team that has passives, you're done for. So you essentially have to pick these units because there's not enough pre-bans for you to pre-ban all the threats to anything that you want to do. And there is a post-ban, sure, but the ban protection ensures that your opponent gets to do what they want, always, almost always, unless they draft really poorly. So yeah, I feel like there's just less fun overall, but that's anecdotal. Some people might think it's more fun. I think in general, from all the people I've talked with, close friends, people in my Discord server, link in the description, by the way, if you want to join. But yeah, in general, the consensus for this season was really, really poor. Despite them saying that there's an 8% increase in players, in matches from the previous season. I don't know. Anyway, they say the upcoming season will mark the first season of 2025, titled the 2025 Spring Season. We are looking on various improvements to address inconveniences experienced during World Arena matches and are preparing systems to ensure a smoother World Arena experience for all heirs. We kindly ask for your continued interest in Epic 7 in the new year, and we wish you the best of luck in World Arena. Thank you. Well, it is, again, really disappointing to see that they are not looking to improve anything. They could have tested something out. They could have tested something out during the preseason. They didn't have to implement it in the new season, but they could have tried, and they didn't. And it's a little bit concerning. I know they want to be cautious, but you don't have to be cautious during the preseason. Just try things out, right? That's all we're really asking. But yeah, anyway, let me know what you guys think of all this data, all these statistics in the comments section down below. I'd love to know what you think about this. But yeah, until next time, take care.